Mhm. All right, Facebook family, we are live. You have tuned in, if you are watching, the Word Among Us interview series where we interview inspiring people, authors in the Catholic space. And today we are very excited. We have a popular deacon, author, blogger. He has his own blog called The Deacon's Bench. And he's written 2 books with the Word Among Us, The Busy Person's Guide to Prayer and The Busy Person's Guide to an Extraordinary Life. Welcome, Deacon Greg Kandra.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. So where are you joining us from?
I am joining you from Queens, New York, Forest Hills, in my home office, where I've been spending most of my life for the last 18 months. Right. And this is part of the Diocese of Brooklyn.
Awesome. And so are you born and raised in New York? How did you find your way up there?
I was born and raised in Maryland, the Archdiocese of Washington. As I like to tell people, I was slapped at my confirmation by Cardinal O'Boyle. I attended Catholic schools down in Maryland, St. Peter's in Olney, and belonged to St. Patrick's Parish in Rockville. And I went to the University of Maryland, and from a very early age, I wanted to be a writer. So I majored in English. I worked on the Diamondback at the University of Maryland. And right after graduating from college, I got a job working for CBS News, and now here I am.
So tell us a little bit about that, because you kind of have an interesting path to be a deacon. And I'm a big CBS fan, I guess you could say. Dan Rather and Katie Couric, a little bit of a fangirl. So tell us a little bit about your background as a journalist or in journalism.
Well, my first job that I got in 1982, right after I graduated from college, was as a production secretary for the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather, which not too long after he had taken over the Evening News. And I did that for a few years. It was mostly typing and answering the phone. Got some amazing experience with some amazing people, but I really wanted to write. So I took the writer's test after a couple of years and passed, and they transferred me to New York, where I became a writer for CBS News Radio, and then worked my way into television, where I wrote for people like Charles Kuralt, Leslie Stahl, Ed Bradley, Dan Rather, and my last job was as a writer for the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric. And I was ordained a deacon in 2007 and decided that I really wanted to work for the church, and went from CBS to working for CNEWA, Catholic Near East Welfare Association, which is a papal agency that's based in New York, and I'm the senior writer there.
So that's an interesting switch, going and deciding that you wanted to become a deacon. How did you get that call? Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, I tell people CBS isn't really the farm team for Catholic clergy. There aren't a lot of us who got started at CBS, but the real pivot point in my life and what really transformed everything was my experience of 9/11. You know, we're just coming up now on the 20th anniversary, which I find so hard to believe. But being in New York during that time and experiencing up close and personal what it was like the first few days and weeks and months after September 11th really made me look more deeply at my life, what I wanted to do with my life, what I had done. And really, I felt called back more deeply into my faith. I'd been, born and raised Catholic. I was cradle Catholic. But it forced me to look more deeply at the limitations of life and how fleeting life is, and realizing that everything I had worked for could be gone in a matter of moments. And wasn't there more that I was supposed to be doing with my life? And that led me on a search spiritually, which eventually led me to a retreat at a Trappist monastery in Georgia, Our Lady of the Holy Spirit. And one of the people that I met there was a deacon. And I was just captivated. I didn't know a lot of deacons. I hadn't really had deacons in my life up to that point, but I was so inspired and moved by him. And there was something, God spoke to my heart and said, that's what you should be doing. And I know guys who discern the vocation for years. And for me, it was just a matter of weeks. And a few weeks after that, I applied for and was accepted into the diaconate formation program for the Diocese of Brooklyn. And here I am.
Wow. And I was just on maybe Facebook today and I saw the 20th anniversary coming up and I had the same reaction. I was like, how can it be 20 years again? Or already, I should say, but what a shift and what a kind of different perspective you get after that. So I can imagine how powerful that was for you. Now, I did listen to some, you were just on EWTN doing an interview, and I think you brought up Thomas Merton. And can you tell me a little bit about that? I really, really love the prayer for discernment. So I took that out when I was watching you.
Yeah, the Thomas Merton, it just captured my imagination like nobody else. My father-in-law actually gave me a copy of The Seven-Story Mountain one year as a gift and said he read it when he was in high school. And he made retreats when he was in college, I think. He went to Notre Dame, made retreats to the Abbey of Gethsemane where Merton lived. And reading about his life just set me on fire, because here was another young New Yorker trying to be a writer who found his life going in a completely different direction. And it really spoke to me in a very meaningful way about how you can change the direction of your life and find a sense of serenity and purpose and peace in the arms of God, doing religious work. And I've always loved that. I've been to the Abbey of Gethsemane a couple of times on retreats and gotten to know monks who knew him and prayed at his grave. It was very humbling and very inspiring.
Yeah, that prayer definitely spoke to me. And it's the one where I will not get it right, because I will talk about your tips on busy people's and guide to prayer. But all I know about it is that it's basically very humbling. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm on the right path, but just the fact that I think I'm doing your will, or I am willing to do your will, God, is enough. And I remember seeing that for the first time and being like, oh my gosh, it's like almost a burden, like off of me, and like overthinking, am I doing this right? So when you're talking about Thomas Merton, I loved that.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of his most popular works, is that one little prayer. And you see it on holy cards, you see it on bookmarks, you see it everywhere. And it really speaks for all of us. I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going to trust that you're going to take me where you want me to go, and that will be enough.
Yes, it was very powerful when I read it. Yeah, I think it was on bookmark, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So that's such an inspiring story. Like, I'm from Emmy Award winner, CBS, to going and deciding to kind of serve the church and serve people. What has been the most fulfilling thing that you've done as a deacon?
Oh gosh. Well, one of the things that I do a lot is I get to go out and travel the country, and I give retreats and speak at convocations. I do some parish missions, and really getting a sense of how vast and diverse the church is, and meeting people from all other parts of the country. I do a little bit of that with my job too. I travel around and give pulpit talks about Catholic Near East Welfare Association and what we do. And it's such a great opportunity to really see how rich and diverse the church is. It's not just our little corner of Maryland or New York, which can be very different from the rest of the country. I also love preaching. I love doing baptisms. One of the greatest gifts of this vocation, and I still pinch myself. I can't believe I get to do these things. But it's such a celebration of life. You see people at their best, because parents are excited and proud and happy to be doing this, and all the families are together. And it doesn't have all the headaches that a wedding does, or all the planning and the aggravation and the stress of that. And it's not as grief-stricken as a funeral or a wake. It's just a moment of pure joy and new beginnings, and I love that.
That's incredible. As you were saying that, actually, my daughter, she's 14 now, but when she was baptized, she was Deacon George at Holy Family in Middletown, Maryland. Shout out, his first baptism.
Oh, wow.
So I remember I think he just talked about her, or that moment recently. So
I tell deacons all the time, when you get your your book of the rite of baptism, write in the back of the book the name of the person, the first baby you baptized, and the date. So you will always have that and always remember that.
Yes. Well, he definitely remembers it. So that's so cool. So you mentioned you always wanted to be a writer. And I think it's so cool because I did also hear in that interview that you were really inspired by E.B. White and Charlotte's Web, which I love so much. But what made you decide to write about the two books that I want to talk a little bit about, The Busy Person's Guide to Prayer and The Busy Person's Guide to an Extraordinary Life?
You know, those, it wasn't my idea. Out of the blue, I got an email from Beth McNamara, Editors Supreme, who I didn't even know. And she found, I guess she found my blog and knew about what I was doing, and dropped me an email. And she said, would you be interested in doing a book? And I've had people over the years who have asked me that. And I've always said, no, I don't have time. Forget it, go away. But she said, I think you're the perfect person to do this, and I'd like to talk to you about it. And I said, okay. And she said, we get a lot of requests from people. Do you have a book for people who are too busy to pray? And something like The Busy Person's Guide to Prayer. And they realized, you know, they kept hearing from people about this. They realized they didn't have anything like that, and maybe they should create something like that. So I guess she thought I was probably a busy person, and maybe I was the person to do this. And the more she was describing it and talking about it and what the book would entail and how we would structure it, the more I thought, you know, maybe this is something I could do, and maybe this is the book that I was meant to do. So I set out and did it, and that was the first thing. And then after we had such a good time working on that together, and it was published and has got a little bit of a following, people at Word Among Us were asking me for other ideas, and they said, well, here's an idea. How about something about the two great commandments, love of God and love of neighbor? And the concept, the big concept, is the busy person's guide to an extraordinary life, and how living out those two commandments can give you an extraordinary life. And I thought, okay, let's try that. And somehow that all came together, and it's, you know, they seem to have caught on with some people, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I obviously read The Busy Person's Guide to Prayer first, as that was your first book. And what would you say to those watching? What is the key to a vibrant prayer life?
It's realizing that it's not that complicated. You know, we tend to think of prayer as, you know, it's all these words, it's all these things that you have to do. You have to do at a certain time in a certain place, and follow a certain pattern. We've got novenas, we've got rosaries, we've got all these devotions, and that's an important part of it. But I think the real goal of this book was to demystify prayer and to make it accessible to as many people as possible. Basically, letting people know that prayer can be anything, and you may be praying right now and not even realizing it. Anything done with intention and with, you know, a certain attitude can be a prayer. And I use the example in the book of Brother Lawrence and the practice of the presence of God, who found God in the presence of God and was able to turn working in a kitchen, doing the pots and pans and preparing food, into a prayer, and feeling intimacy with God through all of that. And I think all of us can do that if we think about it and work on it and make God present in our lives in all the things around us.
Yeah, and your book and the way you write and the way you've done a lot of things, your blog, and I've never been to any of the Mass in person. However, you're very accessible. You put things into very simple terms, and you give in the book very, very easy steps and practical things that you can do to enhance your prayer life. And I was thinking about it. This is just a little funny story where you talk about grace and you talk about saying grace or actually praying it. And it wasn't, I have a couple nieces, but one of them, I think she was 16 when I wrote it down because I was like, this is too funny. She says, she used to think it was for 16 years of her life, bless us, O Lord, and these, I guess, like, and so she was kind of just saying it and these, I guess. And it wasn't until we were all around the table and I was like, Katie, what did you just say? So it is funny how even in some of the prayers, that we know so well, how easy it is to just say them instead of like really pray them.
Yeah, I think intentionality is important and thoughtfulness is important, and trying to really think about what you're praying when you're praying it and why you're praying it and the purpose behind it. Just a little bit of effort can make a huge difference.
Right. And what are the benefits of an enhanced prayer life?
You know, I try to encourage people whenever they can to at least begin and end their day with a prayer. And if you can, even make an effort to go to daily mass, because, you know, as God is my witness, your day is going to be better with prayer than without. Once, you know, we pray the Liturgy of the Hours as religious, and a lot of lay people do also. And the idea is to sanctify the day. You begin, and at certain times throughout the day, you have prayers that you say, and it is putting you in the presence of God or reminding you of God's presence. And there's a certain grace and serenity that comes from all of that. That's really beautiful. And I think I may have mentioned it in the book, the idea of the way that monks pray. You know, the Benedictine credo is ora e labora, work and prayer. So they work for a while, then they pray for a while, then they work for a while, and they pray for a while. And it always struck me that after a while, they all blend together and work becomes prayer. And the prayer that you do becomes a part of your daily life and your work. And I think if we can try to aspire to that, you can't help but feel better and feel more at peace in your day.
And can you talk a little bit about how it is like a relation, and it's a relational act that you're talking to God, but you're also listening?
Yeah, this is something that we don't pay enough attention to. We tend to think of prayer as a monologue. You know, we talk and God listens, and, you know, he's got his list. It's like going to Santa Claus or something, telling him what you want. But I think we need to spend more time listening to him and listening for the promptings of the Holy Spirit. And what is God trying to get me to do in my life? What is he saying to me? I get some of the best ideas for writing and for praying and for homilies when I'm in the shower in the morning or shaving in the morning. I was saying in that interview, you saw the last book idea I got while I was shaving and just thinking about all the things I had going on in my life and wanting to be able to pray about them. And I think listening for what God is trying to tell you, if we really put forth a little bit of effort and find times to be quiet and to give ourselves opportunities for silence, it can do a tremendous amount of good. You can discover things that you hadn't even anticipated.
Mm-hmm. I am brushing my teeth, kind of thinking about and listening, and some silent prayer kind of gal. So I totally relate to that. Do you have a favorite prayer? And that can be either something that you kind of just say, or something that probably a lot of people have memorized as well.
Well, one of my favorites, this was a favorite prayer of my father. He spent the last several years of his life in a nursing home. He prayed the rosary constantly because he had nothing else to do, and it was a great source of comfort for him. But he also prayed the Memorare. And my wife and I say that every night before bed. And it's sort of a way of saying good night, and Mary, please look out for us. I also pray, I have a devotion to the Miraculous Medal Novena. I've told people I'm a Miraculous Medal baby. When my mother was expecting me, she had had a number of problem pregnancies before me and had lost the pregnancies. And so she and my father and my sister, my older sister, made a habit of doing the Miraculous Medal Novena. And here I am, I survived. I was born. And so, O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee. In moments of desperation, or when I don't know what else to say, I'll say that, and that sort of calms me down.
That's so beautiful. And I love praying to Mary as such the best advocate, and something about her being a mom and loving, and just putting some, having her ear is something that's so special. So your second book, you talked a little bit about the concept behind it. So how would you describe an extraordinary life?
Well, again, it gets back to the two great commandments, love of God and love of neighbor. And what I discovered in writing this, which I hadn't really thought of, is that they are almost the same thing. Because when you choose to love your neighbor, when you perform acts of charity, when you go out of your way for another, to honor another, to give dignity to another, to look out for someone, you are loving God, because that person is made in the image and likeness of God and is a child of God. And it's almost like you're getting a twofer, and being able to extend God's love in the world through yourself. And that's a beautiful thing.
And so talk to us a little bit about the book. Again, you give some practical, really doable steps to live an extraordinary life for all of these busy people out there. So give us some examples in the book.
Well, it ties in some ways with the first book. It's making time for prayer, making time to go to church, and making time for others, and making time to extend yourself for others. I talk about, I open the book by talking about the famous slogan of the Army, "Be all you can be," how that became one of the most famous and repeated advertising slogans in all of history. It sums up what we try to do and what we're trying to do with our lives. We want to be all we can be, and don't just settle for being second or third rate, but give all of yourself to God and to others whenever you can, however you can.
And it's so interesting, because before you started talking about that, and I forget this all the time, there are like some very simple, easy steps that we can do to be all we can be. It's praying, it's loving, it's being kind to our neighbor, it's doing service for others. And in a busy person's world, you can get caught up in all of the things around you that you think are going to make you extraordinary, but in God's eyes, it's very simple.
And especially now, I mean, we're so distracted and so preoccupied with all the problems that we have. And, as we're all trying to come out of the pandemic now and trying to re-enter the world, we really need to refocus our lives and think more deeply about what we're doing with our lives. And I think that's been at the top of the list for a lot of people over the last several months is, what am I doing with my life? What's important? And I think this period that we're going through now is an opportunity to try and rediscover that.
And I think that's exactly why these books are so relevant today. And kind of your experience, I'm not equating the two, but a little bit with that perspective change from 9/11 to this pandemic, it shifts all of those things of what you think are important, and what you're doing in your day-to-day. It completely upends them. So
absolutely. And I was thinking the other day, it's going to be repeated on CNN this weekend. One of the most important works that I did when I was at CBS was the documentary 9/11, which captured. It has the only footage that was shot inside the World Trade Center on the day of the attack, after the attack. And it's an extraordinary document that really shows the tremendous sacrifice and courage of, a lot of people who are unknown to us, but will live on in our memory. The incredible work that the rescuers did, that the firefighters did. And being a part of that and being so intimately involved in that was unforgettable. It's an experience I'll never be able to recapture.
I can't imagine, but how proud you must be to be involved in that. And I can't believe it's
it's a piece of history, and I'm so proud that it's going to live on as an important document of that time.
Absolutely. I'm going to check that out. I'm sure I've seen it, but maybe now that I've met you a little bit, I can put a little bit more of a personal.
One of the things that's really, to me, very moving is, it was shot by these two French brothers, Jules and Gideon Naudet, who set out to make a documentary about a probie, a young firefighter on probation. And it happened to be a firehouse that was right next to the World Trade Center. So they were right in the middle of everything. And one of the things that they captured were the final moments in the life of Father Michael Judge. And you see him quietly going off and walking around the lobby after, it had been attacked and people are fleeing, quietly praying. Lips are moving and his head is bowed and he's just off by himself. And then in a few moments, he's gone. The last moments of his life, it's extraordinary. And the sacrifice that he and so many others made for so many of us is is very humbling.
Absolutely. Perfectly said. So do you have any other, switching gears a bit, do you have any other upcoming projects that you're excited about you want to tell us about?
Well, I'm working on another book for another publisher that's going to be out next spring on St. Joseph. I'm excited about that. I'm doing a lot more traveling, as I said, a lot more giving retreats and convocations and parish missions. I'm going down to Florida in November to do a 2-day mini retreat for a parish down there about that we're calling Coming Out of the Upper Room. It's all about re-entering the world after the pandemic, and how do you minister to the world in a world that's in many ways changed, and how do you cope with that? So I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. And that brings me to one of my questions I wanted to ask you. For those people that have stopped going to church during the pandemic and don't see a good reason to go back, what would you say to them?
You know, I was thinking not too long ago about my friend and mentor, Bishop Frank Caggiano from the Diocese of Bridgeport. And he was the head of the diaconate program when I began formation. He released an absolutely beautiful video, which I posted on my blog. I should repost it, back in the spring, encouraging people to come back to Mass. And instead of saying, you know, you have to come back to Mass, it's an obligation, you know, it's something you need to take seriously, blah, 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 blah. He said, it's time to come home. This is where we belong. This is our home. This is our community of faith, and we need to get back together. And I was so moved by that. And it really put a different perspective on it from what I've heard. And I was remembering midnight Mass, or the Mass of Christmas Eve. It wasn't at midnight, it was about 10 o'clock, which was the first big Mass where we had really opened up the church again, and we're inviting people to come back. We didn't have a full choir. We didn't have a lot of people who showed up. There were maybe 150 or 200 people that showed up in a church that seats 1,000 people at my parish. But at the end of Mass, after everything was said and done, we had a small schola that was singing Christmas carols up in the choir loft. And they started singing Silent Night and various other things. I get so choked up just thinking about it. And people who had started to leave the church at the end of Mass to go home and have dinner or whatever, turned around and they came back in. Mm. And they wanted to hear the music. And they went up to the altar, to the manger scene, and they just stood there. They weren't looking at the choir. They weren't looking at each other. They just wanted to look at that scene and be together as a family, and to hear that music and to experience that sense of being together again as people of faith. And I said to our pastor, Bishop Sanchez, he's an auxiliary bishop in the Diocese of Brooklyn, I said, as good as your homily was, that homily was even better, because it said so much of what people wanted. They wanted that experience of church. They wanted to be back together, and they wanted to hear the music and smell the incense and see that manger scene. And that's what it meant to be in church. And I think we need to remember that and try and share that as much as we can with one another. It's the full experience. It's not just something that you do because you have to, but because you want to and because it enriches you.
That was such a moving answer. And as soon as you said Silent Night, I started to tear up. I was like, he's going to tear up. Because that's
gotcha.
You know, everybody knows, like that, everybody knows that feeling. And it's easy. We're kind of like goldfish. Sometimes it's easy to forget those things until you go back and you experience it. Same thing. I mean, I didn't go back on midnight Mass, but to go back and like smell the incense and like see everybody, be able to like touch and feel and all those things, it was like, so come home, everybody. So the last question I have, and from James Lipton in the Inside the Actors Studio, when you arrive in heaven, what would you like to hear God say to you?
Well, first I would say, if I arrive in heaven. I'm not going to hedge my bets on this just yet. But I think I would hope that he would say what he, I hope and pray, says to everybody, which is, wow, you're here. Welcome home.
Yes, come home and welcome home.
Yeah.
Those are two very great answers. Well, Deacon Greg, thank you so much for being here with us today. I want to remind everyone of a lot of things because you have a lot of cool projects. Everyone check out the Deacon's Bench. We'll put all of these in the comments, but it's your blog that's so cool. You share information about your books and upcoming projects, interesting things, like you said, videos. And then the two books that I would love for you to check out, everyone, they're so great. They're so easy to digest, give you simple steps, very doable. The Busy Person's Guide to Prayer and The Busy Person's Guide to an Extraordinary Life. Both are amazing books. And we're very excited to read your new book about St. Joseph. And that's okay. It's not with the money. We'll still check it out. But Deacon Greg Kandra, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. God bless.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.